Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere most history books would rather avoid quietly, dimly, as if brushing past it in a footnote. It's a place that smells like rosewater on the surface, but rot underneath. You might picture medieval disease as loud plague carts, screaming townsfolk, but leprosy didn't shout. It whispered, it isolated, and it lingered for decades. The leper colony wasn't hell, exactly. But it was a place where the outside world could pretend hell had a mailing address. And you probably wouldn't last a day, not because of the sores or the laws, but because of the smell. You walk in expecting pity. What you get is a humid, cloying cocktail of decay, vinegar, and old sheep wool. It's the kind of scent that gets under your nails, curls into your hair, and stays there through prayer, penance, and hopeless rinses. And yes, it rains inside the dormitory more often than outside, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and your local time. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first steps past the wooden gate, rough planks nailed together and barely standing. And you're immediately greeted not by people, but by flies. Fat, slow, content flies that aren't in any rush to move, even when you swat. The path to the main hall is a patchwork of dirt and flattened straw, dark with moisture that never dries, even in summer. There's something perpetually damp about this place, as if the ground refuses to forget what's been buried beneath it. The buildings, if you can call them that, sag like tired shoulders. Wattle and daub walls patched with whatever was handy, sometimes with cloth, sometimes with bones. You wonder if it's your imagination or if that really is a human femur holding up the corner of the laundry hut. Welcome to your new home. You're handed a robe grayish-brown, the color of wet bark, and told to live quietly. No one meets your eyes. Most wear hoods, not just for warmth, but for shame, and to keep the flies out. You try not to stare at the woman by the well with only 3 fingers on one hand, and a face that looks like melted wax. She's humming. That's what gets you, not the deformity, but the normalcy of the tune, a fragment of a hymn. You want to ask where the doctor is, but you already know the answer. There isn't one. There's a caretaker, a former monk whose only medical experience is reading psalms over dying sheep. You'll see him later. For now, you're ushered into the communal quarters. 14 cots lined up under beams black with smoke and mold. You get the one nearest the wall, beside a bucket that seems to serve both as toilet and occasional foot bath. You sit down. The mattress sighs under your weight, exhaling a dusty cloud of old skin and crushed beetles. Someone across the room coughs. It sounds deep, wet, and final. You try not to think about how many people have died on this mattress. They don't burn the bedding here. They can't. Too few blankets to waste. Get used to the singing. Someone whispers from the next cot. An older man, eyeless in one socket, scarred on the chin. They sing all the time. Not for God, for themselves. He pauses. You will too. Later, you're taken to the chapel, a small, leaning structure with crooked stained glass that lets in more wind than light. The sermon is short, delivered by a priest with bandaged hands and a smile too wide. He speaks about patience, about suffering being a gift. You notice no one's listening. Most are just grateful to be sitting on real benches, not damp straw. Outside, there's a garden, if you can call it that, mostly weeds and a few herbs that haven't died from foot traffic or goats. That's where they grow their medicines. If you catch a fever, you'll be given something brewed from nettles, rosemary, and boiled pig marrow. It might help. More likely, it just makes you smell worse. Historians still argue whether leper colonies were meant to punish or protect. The laws said they were charitable havens, safe places for the sick to live in dignity. But the walls, the bells, the rituals, they speak more of exile than mercy. You aren't imprisoned, but try walking back into town and see how fast a farmer reaches for his pitchfork. And so you sit in the garden, hands in your lap, listening to the flies buzz and the wind moan through cracked shutters. Someone laughs in the distance, probably over something stupid. A story about a pig escaping. People here laugh often. You weren't expecting that. It's not joyful laughter, but something else. Desperate, hollow, like the sound of a pot with nothing in it. At night, sleep comes slow. The darkness is almost total. One candle per room, and only until it burns down. You lie on your side, facing the wall, your back cold even under 2 layers of wool. Rats scurry in the thatch above. You tell yourself they're just mice. They aren't. You feel one brush your toes and you don't move. Because if you scream, someone else might scream too, and it'll just wake the whole dormitory. You wonder if you should have just stayed outside the colony, died quickly in the fields or the woods. But you remember the look on your neighbor's face when they saw the sore on your arm. Not fear, disgust. That's what broke you. That's what brought you here. Not the pain, not the weakness, the look, the silence that followed it. You remember the village priest whispering as he marked your forehead with ashes? Go, be still, do not return. A kind of curse, a kind of mercy. You watch the shadows shift and settle, and wonder what tomorrow will smell like. Probably a mix of boiled cabbage and broken promises. You breathe in through your mouth and try to sleep anyway. Welcome to the leper colony. You've already lasted longer than most. You wake up to the sound of bells, not church bells, but small. Tinny clappers tied to wrists, belts, and crutches. Everyone wears one, even you. It's not optional. You're a warning now. Like a walking alarm, the purpose is simple: let the healthy know you're coming, so they can move away. But here, inside the colony, it serves a different function. You hear those bells every hour, every step, and it becomes the pulse of the place. Ding, drag, cough, ding. The bells are your soundtrack, and they remind you that you're not alone, and also that you're all together for the same reason: unwanted proximity. Outside these walls, you're dangerous. In here, you're just another background noise. The colony isn't exactly a prison. Technically, you can leave whenever you like. There are no guards, no locks, but that's only because there's nowhere to go. If you step outside the gates without your bell or your robes, you're breaking the law. In England, it was once punishable by whipping. In France, by exile to worse colonies. Historians still argue whether these were acts of mercy or control. After all, it was the church that often funded leprosariums, preaching Christian charity while simultaneously forbidding you from entering holy spaces. You were forgiven by God, but not allowed near his altar. A quiet contradiction that makes your teeth itch. The colony itself exists in a sort of purgatory, not fully part of the town, not entirely outside it. Sometimes merchants stop by, but they don't come in. They leave their goods on a platform near the gate, ring a bell, and back away, as if they've just thrown a bone to a dog. The exchange is simple: you take what you need, leave what little coin you have, and no one speaks. Communication is for equals. You learn quickly that no one out there wants your words. Inside, you're surrounded by others who have made peace with this middle space. Some call it a haven, others a sentence. You meet a man named Peter who used to be a baker. His hands are now clawed like roots, too twisted for dough. He still smells faintly of yeast, though, which is oddly comforting. He says it's because he sleeps beside a sack of old barley, a habit from his former life. There's something in his voice that tells you he still bakes in his dreams. Then there's Agnes, a widow who jokes too much and always has a twig in her mouth. She claims it helps with the nausea. You don't ask why she's nauseous. You don't ask anything too personal. Asking implies someone owes you an answer. And here, everyone's already paid more than their share. The communal hall is where most gather, if only to pass the time. There's a fireplace, though no one remembers when it last held more than ashes. Someone occasionally reads aloud from an old psalter, but mostly it's humming and muttering. Conversation is light, cautious, like people trying to avoid setting off a minefield of memories. You notice how people shuffle, not walk, how no one hugs, how they keep an inch of space between their shoulders, even on the coldest nights. That space is sacred, an invisible moat around their pain. You learn to stop reaching out. One day, a cart arrives, 2 oxen, a creaking axle, and a sack of dried beans. This is a good day. Beans mean protein, which means fewer fainting spells. A priest from the nearby town is traveling with it thin, young, with a face like wet parchment and a voice too soft for wind. He doesn't come in. He stands by the gate and delivers a sermon about suffering being redemptive. You and the others listen, not because you believe it, but because there's nothing else to do. He leaves bread, crosses himself, and walks away without making eye contact. Still, you're grateful. Bread is bread. That night, there's a kind of feast if you can call boiled beans and limp cabbage a feast. People smile. Someone tells a story about a chicken who laid eggs in a bishop's boot. The details make no sense, but the punchline earns a few genuine laughs. You find yourself smiling too, and that scares you a little. Not because joy is rare, but because it feels like betrayal, like you're forgetting to be miserable. But here's the thing, the colony isn't just suffering, it's also adaptation. People build new habits, new roles. Someone repairs shoes using fish bones. Someone else grows onions in chamber pots. It's ingenuity born from scarcity. You begin to understand that survival here isn't just about health, it's about usefulness. If you can contribute even a little, you earn your place. You decide to help mend robes. Your hands shake, but not too badly. You're slow, but careful. The others nod. That's enough. You're one of them now. Still, the divide between them and the outside world remains a chasm. Occasionally, a rider passes the outer path, deliberately not looking in. Once, a child tosses a stone toward the gate, then runs. It's not cruelty exactly. It's fear with no outlet. You pick up the stone. It's ordinary, smooth, and a little warm from the sun. You place it on the windowsill of the chapel, unsure why. Maybe as a reminder that the world still exists, even if it pretends you don't. Some days are harder than others. On one, a woman named Beatrix doesn't wake up. She wasn't old, not exactly, but her breathing had been shallow for days. No one cries. There's a quiet ritual. Her body is washed with vinegar and lavender, then wrapped in old linen. She's buried at dusk behind the chapel. No gravestone, just a marker made from 2 branches lashed together. You help dig. The soil is heavy. You've never been so tired. Later, someone places a sprig of thyme on the grave. Beatrix liked thyme in her soup. That's enough memorial. No one talks about her the next day, not out of coldness, but necessity. Too many names makes grief unbearable. You sit in the garden again, the air thick with the scent of mint and decay. You hear the clappers, the soft thuds of dragging feet, and the ever-present buzz of flies. You realize this place isn't quite hell. It's limbo, not suffering, not peace, just waiting. And still, you endure. You're 2 days in now. Most wouldn't have made it past the first morning. You wake to a hand on your shoulder, light but firm. The caretaker, Thomas, stands above you holding a bowl of tepid water and a worn razor. It's time, he mutters, almost apologetically. You sit up, bones aching like they've aged 50 years overnight. Today is your formal admission, not into the colony that happened the moment you crossed the gate, but into its strange, solemn order. This ceremony is both deeply symbolic and, frankly, humiliating. You're led outside, barefoot, through mud that's both cold and inexplicably sticky, like it's clinging to you on purpose. A few others gather around, some leaning on crutches, others watching from under sagging hoods. No one speaks. Thomas starts by shaving your head. There's no mirror, but you feel the cold air against your scalp with each stroke. The razor isn't sharp. It tugs more than it cuts, and each pull feels like it's stripping away a little more than hair dignity, identity, maybe even hope. Eyebrows, too. You're told it's for hygiene. You suspect it's also a form of erasure. You're becoming less you, more one of them. Next, you're handed a robe. Not the patchy thing you wore yesterday, but a new one, or new by colony standards. It's coarse, stiff, dyed a tired gray that blends perfectly into the landscape of ash, fog, and fatigue. It smells of vinegar and old wood smoke. You're told to put it on with your arms outstretched, as if being clothed by divine command. It hangs on you like a question left unanswered. Then comes the bell, your bell. Small, with a rusted loop, tied around your waist with a piece of string that's frayed at both ends. You give it a tentative shake. The sound is faint, tinny, oddly cheerful, It feels obscene, like laughter at a funeral. Finally, you're led to the chapel. It's not much leaning walls, a warped altar, a cracked wooden cross, but today it holds a certain gravitas. The priest, Father Guillaume, begins to read from a manuscript that has seen more weather than worship. His voice is soft, like someone telling a bedtime story they've repeated too many times. You are now marked, he says, but not forgotten. You are set apart, but not unloved. You suffer, but not alone. You glance at the others. No one is crying. This isn't a moment for tears. It's a moment for accepting that your life now belongs to a different rhythm, a quieter world. You kneel when instructed, though your knees protest. The stone is cold, and you realize you're not kneeling for God. You're kneeling for the life you left behind, offering it like an old garment you'll never wear again. Historians still debate the purpose of this ceremony. Was it to purify, to shame, to help the afflicted feel seen, or to officially vanish them from polite society? The rituals vary by region. Some include ashes, others holy water. Some colonies play music. Yours does not. Just silence and bells. Always the bells. After the ceremony, no one claps, no one nods. You simply rise, changed. Not visibly, leprosy takes its time, but internally. You walk differently, slower, perhaps. Or maybe it's just that the world now responds to you like you're walking through water scene. But from a distance, later that day, an old woman named Marjorie pats your arm. You're one of us now, she says, and there's no warmth in it. Not unkindness either, just fact, like saying it will rain. You return to your cot. Your old robe has been taken. You wonder what happens to it. Burned, washed, given to the next person who stumbles through the gate in denial. That night, you lie awake for hours. Your scalp itches where hair once lived. The bell tied to your waist shifts with each breath, a cruel lullaby. You hear the rustling of the others, the coughing, the occasional moan. You're part of a chorus now, one that never rehearses and never stops. The next morning, you're sent to the laundry hut. Your job stirring boiling vats of linen steeped in ash and lye. It smells like soap's angrier cousin. Your hands sting, but you say nothing. No one complains. Complaints don't make the work lighter. You work beside a man named Hugo, who has no nose and a sense of humor that could resurrect the dead. He jokes about how he's the best at sniffing out gossip. I've got a real talent for smelling trouble. Except, not literally. You laugh harder than the joke deserves. You're grateful for any levity. Later, he tells you about his admission day. He says he felt like he was being buried alive. Except, he adds, no coffin. Just robes and bells. He shows you a trick how to muffle the bell with a bit of waxed cloth, if you want to sneak up on people. It's useless knowledge, and you treasure it. In the afternoon, you're allowed to rest. You sit on a stool under the colony's only fig tree, though it hasn't borne fruit in years. Someone once painted a smiley face on its trunk. Time has worn it into something eerie and unreadable. You touch the bark anyway. The colony has a rhythm, and you're starting to feel it slow, predictable, oddly comforting. Wake, work, eat, wait, repeat. You find small joys in routine. A clean bowl, a warm patch of sunlight, a song hummed off-key. You're learning how little it takes to feel human. One evening, a man named Anselm arrives. He's too young. His skin is mostly intact, but his eyes are hollow. He's brought by his mother, who doesn't cross the threshold. She kisses him once, on the forehead, then walks away. Doesn't look back. Anselm stares after her until she disappears. No one approaches him. We give him space. Everyone needs space at the beginning. That night, you hear him cry, not loudly, just enough to be real. You don't comfort him. You wouldn't have wanted anyone to do that for you either. Some grief needs privacy. In the days that follow, Anselm changes. The robe fits better. The clapper bell stops sounding awkward. He smiles once at Agnes. You smile too, quietly. Maybe he'll survive. Maybe you will too. And maybe surviving doesn't mean what it used to. The days begin to blur, stitched together by chores, echoes, and the endlessly gray sky. You rise with the sun. though it's rarely visible, just a pale smudge behind the clouds, like a memory of warmth. Breakfast is always the same, a thin broth of barley and leeks, served lukewarm in wooden bowls that never fully dry between meals. You no longer flinch at the smell. That, too, has faded into the fabric of your new normal. There's a kind of hush that blankets daily life here, not the sacred hush of a monastery, but something heavier, worn out. You trudge through your routines like a ghost with calloused feet. Today, you are tasked with carrying wood from the pile behind the infirmary. The logs are damp and riddled with insects, but no one complains. Fire is a luxury. Sometimes, there's only enough kindling to heat water for the sickest. You're not among them yet. Still, every splinter you touch feels like a countdown. You pass Beatrix's grave again. There's moss growing around the wooden marker. You resist the urge to kneel. Morning is quiet here. Too much noise might remind others of their own names. Etched invisibly into that soil, inside the kitchen, Agnes is peeling turnips with surprising speed. She grins when she sees you. "We're in for a feast," she says dryly. "Boiled turnips again. But today, salt." She holds up a finger like it's a relic. You smile. You can't help it. A pinch of salt is reason enough to get out of bed. Historians note how medieval leprosaria often had gardens for herbs, but rarely for spice. Most colonies relied on what the outside world forgot to withhold, which means salt, when it appears, feels like contraband from a forgotten world. Lunch is subdued, as always, but there's a flicker of satisfaction in every face. You chew your turnip slowly, savoring the grit and the faint hint of flavor. Peter mumbles something about how it tastes like the sea. Everyone nods. You realize no one here remembers the sea. The colony sits inland, surrounded by low hills and tangled woods, as if nature itself is conspiring to keep you contained. After the meal, you help clean the dishes in water so cold your fingers ache. They'll ache for hours, but that's fine. It reminds you they still work. Not everyone here has working hands. Some have stumps, or gnarled claws, or flesh so tender it cracks from a breeze. You learn to adapt carrying water in elbows, stirring soup with wrists. Necessity teaches you faster than pity ever could. The priest stops by in the afternoon, not the young one. This is Father Guillaume again, and he looks even older than last week. He walks with a slight limp, one hand wrapped in cloth. You wonder if he's sick too. If so, he hides it well. He brings a book today, not a Bible, but a collection of sermons from some obscure French abbot. He reads aloud while the residents gather around, pretending to listen. You pretend too. It's not the words that matter. It's the rhythm, the voice, the shared moment of stillness. Someone starts knitting. Someone else falls asleep upright. No one minds. There's peace in repetition, and it's repetition that defines your day. After Vespers, if the evening prayer can still be called that you return to your cot, you check the bucket beside it. Empty. Thank God. Last night, someone had a bad spell. The smell lingered until morning. You drape your damp cloak over your feet. There are no blankets left. You'll have to earn one, or wait for someone else to die. Outside, the moon is veiled behind mist. You hear frogs. That surprises you. You'd forgotten the world beyond the walls still exists. Sometimes a bird lands on the roof. Sometimes you smell chimney smoke from a village downwind. These things feel foreign now, like fairy tales you once believed in. Historians still argue whether life in a leper colony was more prison or pilgrimage. Some records suggest community, others hint at despair. But walking the stone paths here, smelling the wet clay and hearing the shuffle of wounded bodies, you realize the truth isn't either or. It's both. You're not quite free, but you're not chained. Not completely. You begin to notice details you missed before: the way Agnes hums while she cooks, the sound Hugo makes before he tells a joke, the tiny stone bird someone carved into the chapel's lintel. You trace it with your finger one day, wondering who made it. No one knows. Maybe it was always there. Maybe it's watching you. In the laundry hut, a fight breaks out. Not fists, no one has the strength, but sharp words. Someone accuses another of stealing herbs. The accused, a thin man with skin like parchment, denies it. Voices rise, then fall just as quickly. Anselm steps in, quietly, calmly. He says something you can't hear, but it works. The tension dissolves like salt in soup. You're amazed. When he first arrived, he barely spoke. Now he walks with purpose. It gives you hope. That night, you dream of your old village. Not faces those have faded, but the sound of the river, the taste of apples, the feeling of sun on your neck. You wake with tears on your cheeks. It's the first time you've cried here. You don't tell anyone. Crying is allowed, but dangerous. It makes you remember too much. During morning chores, a boy arrives, barefoot, thin, maybe 10. He's led by a man who doesn't stay. The boy has no visible marks, but he's silent, eyes like stones. His name is Michel. You hear it once, then never again. He doesn't speak. He just watches. People give him space. Children aren't rare here, but they're unsettling. Innocence among rot. You wonder who'll teach him the chores, the rituals, the things no one writes down. Maybe you will. You find him later in the chapel, tracing the stone bird. He's seen it too. You nod to him. He nods back. That's enough for now. Days stretch. You learn to walk slower, not because you're tired, but because there's no rush. You learn which benches don't creak, which paths stay dry, which herbs make tea bearable. You learn to speak less, but mean more. When someone asks how you are, you say steady. That's become the highest praise here. You're not well. You never will be. But you are steady. And that is enough. The bell is the first thing you hear in the morning and the last thing you hear at night. You never take it off. Even when you sleep, it's tied loosely around your waist or tucked under your pillow, like a pet you can't trust to behave. At first, you hated it, resented its sound, the way it announced your arrival like a joke no one asked for. But now it's become part of you, like a heartbeat made of metal. You walk differently because of it, slower, more careful. Not to avoid making noise you've given up on silence, but because you've accepted the rhythm. It's how people know you're coming, how they know you still exist. The irony is that inside the colony, the bell has almost the opposite purpose. You don't need to warn anyone here. They already know what you are. No one's afraid of catching what you have not anymore. You're past that stage, but you wear it anyway. And they do too. Every single one of them. A constant choir of quiet, discordant jingles, like wind chimes made of shame. The origin of the leper's bell is unclear. Historians still debate whether it began as a church edict or a folk practice, maybe both. In some regions, it was a wooden clapper. In others, an actual cowbell. Some colonies used whistles, but the goal was the same. Declare your presence. Keep your distance. Let the world know it's safe by reminding it you are not. You learn to listen for the different tones. Hugo's bell has a dull thud. He's stuffed cloth into it to muffle the sound. Agnes prefers hers loose, so it rings with every step. Peter's barely makes a sound anymore. The string is fraying, and the rust has sealed the clapper halfway shut. Sometimes he taps it manually, just to be sure he still can. You find yourself doing it too, reaching down absently, flicking your bell just to hear that tiny chime and confirm you're still here, that the world still hears you, even if it wishes it didn't. Outside the colony, the bell marks you for avoidance. It's a death sentence on a string, but inside, it's a strange kind of tether. You hear it when you're in the garden, when you're working in the laundry hut, when you're crouched by the hearth picking weevils out of flour. You hear it in the distance, and you know someone is still walking, still breathing, still trying. There's comfort in that. On feast days, what passes for them here, the bells become part of the ritual. You all gather in the chapel, candles lit even if it's midday, and the priest leads a short procession around the grounds. You walk slowly, robes dragging through dust and dew, and the bells ring in a mournful harmony. It's not joyful. It's not meant to be. It's a reminder of exile, of endurance, of the strange life you now inhabit. Michel, the quiet boy, has taken to polishing his bell every night. He sits beside the fire, holding it in both hands like a relic. He doesn't speak, but you see the focus in his eyes. It matters to him, even if he doesn't understand why yet. Maybe because it's the only thing in this place he can call his own. You help him once, showing him how to tie the string tighter so it doesn't chafe. He doesn't thank you, he just nods, solemn and adult, in a way children shouldn't be. At night, the bells continue. Faint rings in the dark as people shift in their sleep. You grow used to it. Sometimes, you think you hear a bell and realize it was just the wind, or your memory filling the silence. One evening, a visitor arrives at the gate. Unusual. She's young, dressed in red wool, with a basket of herbs and a face full of worry. She doesn't enter feudo, but she speaks. Her brother, she says, is sick. She doesn't say leprosy. She says the signs. She asks for advice. The caretaker listens, then gives her a packet of dried lavender and vinegar. It won't help. You know that, but she's grateful anyway. Before she leaves, she asks what the bells mean. The caretaker pauses. They mean we're still here, he says quietly. She nods, and you watch her walk away, shrinking with every step until she's just another shape on the horizon. The next day, the caretaker brings out a new box of Belle's old ones, really cleaned and mended. He sets them on a table near the chapel and invites people to choose. Yours getting too rusty, he asks. Take another. Most ignore him. You think about it. Yours works fine. But there's something tempting about the idea of a new voice. A fresh sound. You pick one slightly larger, with a deeper chime. It feels strange at first, like someone else's breath in your mouth. But by midday, it's yours. That evening, Agnes notices. You sound taller. She jokes. You chuckle. I've been working on my posture. These are the jokes you trade now, quiet, pointless. Life-saving? The bell isn't just a sound anymore. It's a story. When someone dies, their bell is placed in a wooden box behind the chapel, not buried with them that would waste material, but not reused immediately either. There's a waiting period. Out of respect, they say, but really, it's about memory. No one wants to walk around jingling like someone they used to love. You've heard stories, rumors of old colonies where the dead were buried with bells still attached. So they'd ring if they came back to life. Some say, so the devils would know not to touch them. Say others. Either way, it's a haunting thought, that even in death, the bell might ring one last time. You start noticing when bells go silent, a missing note in the usual melody. You ask no questions, you just listen. And when you hear a new bell join the chorus, you wonder who arrived and what they left behind to get here. Life in the colony is quiet, but it's never still. People come, people go, mostly they fade. The bells keep you from fading too quickly. You find that strangely beautiful. One day, Michael gives you his bell, just hands it to you without a word. You're confused. He points to a new one, slightly shinier, tied at his side. You nod. You keep the old bell in your pocket, not because it's useful, but because it matters. You don't know why. Not yet. Maybe one day you'll give it to someone else. Maybe that's what the bells are for, not just warning, not just exile, but legacy. A soft sound that says, I was here, I mattered, and if you listen closely enough, you can still hear me. Somehow, despite the stench, despite the bells, despite the endless drizzle of gray mornings and gray food, the topic of love still surfaces, not often, and never loudly, but it hums beneath the surface like a secret prayer no one dares voice too clearly. You catch glimpses of it in glances exchanged across the chapel pews, in the way hands linger slightly too long when passing bowls or blankets. Desire, in its quiet and unruly way, refuses to die here. It simply adapts. Of course, you don't ask questions. No one does. That's the first rule of intimacy in the colony. Silence is safer. You begin to notice Agnes walking beside the caretaker more often, not touching, not laughing, just near him. When they speak, their voices are lower. When they part ways, they pause just a breath too long, and no one mentions it, not because it's shameful, but because it's fragile. Here, affection is more valuable than food. It must be protected like a flame in the wind. Historians sometimes argue about whether lepers were allowed to marry. In some regions, they could, but only within the colony. Elsewhere, marriage was forbidden entirely. Why bother, some wrote. They are of no use. But humans are inconvenient creatures. They cling to connection even when logic fails. You hear whispers of couples sharing cots, of hands finding each other beneath robes during cold nights, of kisses hidden behind laundry lines. Nothing grand, nothing romantic in the way poets might dream, but real, awkward, tender, dangerous. You understand the risk. Any close contact could spread sores, or at least suspicion, yet, in a place where everyone is already shunned. The fear of being hurt sometimes feels smaller than the fear of being untouched. You remember your first month here, how even accidental brushes felt like lightning, how the absence of touch was its own kind of ache. You start to notice how often people sit in pairs, not obviously just close enough that their robes overlap. Sometimes, late at night, you hear muffled laughter, or the soft creak of a cot under shared weight. You turn over and pretend to sleep, not because you disapprove, because you envy them. One day, a young woman named Isabeau arrives. Her face is smooth but pale. She walks with a slight limp and keeps one hand hidden beneath her sleeve. She doesn't speak much at first, but her eyes are sharp. She's assigned to kitchen duty, where she works beside you, scraping the last bits of dried meat from a copper pot. You exchange few words, mostly nods. Then, one day, she tells a joke, dry, unexpected. You laugh, startled, and she smiles not at the joke, but at your reaction. Something unspoken settles between you, not love, not yet, but the memory of it. You share shifts, you trade tasks. One day, she saves a piece of dried fig for you. You don't ask where she got it, you just accept it like a relic. That evening, you offer her your share of the stew. She declines, but her smile lingers long after she turns away. The colony doesn't have rules against these things, no one's bothering to enforce them, but there's a quiet understanding. Affection is fine. Attachment is risky. Hearts don't heal like skin does, and if someone leaves by death, by disappearance, by reassignment, it can undo you. That's why most love here is held lightly, like water in cupped hands. But even lightness can be real. Anselm, now growing into his role as a quiet caretaker of the newer arrivals, starts spending more time near Michelle. He never says it, but the way he watches over the boy, gently corrects him, listens without flinching, it's love in another form. Not romantic, but fierce, familial, and unmistakably deep. You see how Michelle leans into him during evening prayers, how Anselm adjusts his bell for him when the string slips. They've become something to each other that neither of them had before safety. There's a sweetness in the way bonds form here, without promise, without future, just present tenderness. Isabeau starts sitting beside you more often, during mealtime, during sermons, during quiet hours by the fig tree. You still don't speak much, but you begin to understand the language of quiet proximity. One day, she offers you her cloak when it rains. You refuse, but she insists. You drape it over your shoulders and pretend not to notice the warmth it carries. That night, you dream not of the past, but of her hands. Scarred, yes, but capable, real, alive. It's the first time you've dreamed about someone here. The next morning, you find a string of pressed flowers tucked into your bedding. Tiny weeds, mostly, daisies, a sprig of rosemary, one petal you can't identify. You look up, and Isabeau is already gone for morning prayers. You pocket the flowers. You don't need words. The others notice. They always do. No one says anything. Peter nods at you once across the garden. You nod back. You're not sure what to call what's happening. There's no space here for romance the way it exists in songs or stories. No courtship, no dancing, no letters, just shared work, shared glances, and the mutual decision to hold space for each other. Still, it's enough. More than enough. You catch yourself humming again. Agnes hears it and raises an eyebrow. Careful, she whispers. That's how it starts. You grin. What? The downfall, she replies. Always starts with humming. She walks away before you can respond. That night, Isabeau sits beside you by the fire. She doesn't speak. You offer her half your bread. She accepts. You don't touch. You just sit, breathing, listening, being. That's how it begins. And how it continues. A slow, careful love that doesn't ask to be named. It simply grows in the quiet. You're still sick. You're still exiled. You're still waiting for the pain to catch up to your joints, your lungs, your nerves. But you're not alone. Not anymore. And for tonight, that's everything. You don't expect to admire anyone here, and yet, the priests who choose to stay, not the ones assigned, but the ones who volunteer, begin to haunt your thoughts in the oddest way. You first noticed Father Guillaume during a storm, when the chapel roof leaked so badly the psalter warped in his hands, and he just laughed, shrugged, and continued reading from memory. That night, you thought he's lost his mind, but the more you watch him, the more you begin to wonder if maybe he's found something everyone else lost. He doesn't smile often, but when he does, it's with his whole face exhausted, cracked, and somehow radiant. He wears no gloves, though his fingers are half gnarled with sores, and when he hands you a bowl or touches your shoulder in passing, he doesn't flinch, not even once. That kind of deliberate stillness isn't bravery. It's something deeper, older. You find yourself studying him, how he never rushes, how he never raises his voice, how he knows every name, even of the dying, especially of the dying. There are others like him in other colonies, men and women who came not to be cured, but to serve. Historians still debate their motives. Some say it was pure piety. Others suggest guilt, penance, or secret vows. Perhaps it was ambition cloaked in humility, a fast track to sainthood. But standing next to Father Guillaume while he cleans the wounds of a woman who can no longer speak, you see no ambition. You see tired kindness and unflinching routine. He works like someone brushing crumbs off a table patiently, thoroughly, without seeking applause. One afternoon, you overhear Agnes say he used to be a bishop's assistant, could have stayed in a marble hall, she mutters, but chose this. Then she adds, foolish man, with a softness that sounds more like admiration than scorn. You later ask him, foolishly, why he came. He looks at you for a long time, then replies, everyone else was turning away. I decided to turn toward, that's all. You think about that sentence for the rest of the day. It follows you into your chores, into your dreams. I decided to turn toward what would make someone do that. There's a younger priest too, Father Allard, who visits occasionally. He wears cleaner robes and stays on the chapel steps, never venturing deep into the colony. He brings dried fruit and psalms. People tolerate him. He's not cruel, just distant. Once, he asks you if you found peace. You want to laugh. Instead, you say, I found bread. He doesn't get the joke. You don't blame him. Allard belongs to the world of healthy people, the land of polished words and soft hands. Guillaume belongs to you, and you to him, in a quiet, unspoken way. One evening, during prayer, the candlelight flickers across his face, casting strange shadows under his eyes. You notice the tremble in his hands, the way he leans against the lectern ever so slightly. You wonder how long he'll last. You wonder who will take his place when he's gone. Not Allard. That much is clear. He leaves at dusk, always just before the night settles in, as if afraid of what might cling to him after dark. One day, Guillaume doesn't appear at prayers. Whispers begin. Some say he's just resting. Others fear the worst. You volunteer to bring him supper. He's in his cell, a tiny, square room behind the chapel, barely large enough for a cot and a wooden cross. He's sitting on the edge of the bed, shoulders hunched, hands shaking as he lifts a cup of water. You set the food down without a word. He glances up, gives a faint nod. It's just a fever, he says. You don't believe him, but you don't question him either. The next day, he returns to the chapel, paler, slower, but upright. Everyone breathes a little easier. Even Michelle, who usually hides during services, appears in the back row. Guillaume's voice cracks during the sermon. No one minds. In fact, They listen more intently. He speaks of Job, of suffering without understanding, of grace hidden beneath rot. And for the first time, you feel the chapel isn't just a place for rituals, it's a place to be seen. After the service, he walks with you to the garden. You sit beneath the fig tree and say nothing. He closes his eyes and lets the breeze touch his face. You don't realize you've been holding your breath until he sighs. It's strange, he murmurs, but I never felt God more clearly than I do here. You glance at the peeling bark, the uneven soil, the broken fence where the goats sometimes escape. Why, you ask? He shrugs. Because everything unnecessary has been burned away. You think of your own life, the things you clung to, the mirrors, the names, the plans, all gone. What's left is smaller, but somehow more solid. Agnes brings Guillaume broth every evening after that. Sometimes Isabeau joins her. You watch from afar, sensing something holy in the way they move, slow, careful, reverent, not worshiping him, exactly, just honoring what he carries. You begin to imitate him in small ways, the way he folds his hands, the way he listens fully, even when someone is rambling about nothing, the way he never turns away, no matter how bad the sores become. You find yourself hoping quietly, absurdly, that one day someone will look at you and feel that kind of steadiness. Not pity, not awe, just trust. You notice others doing it too. The colony is still full of pain, of course. People still die, still fade. But there's a shift, subtle and strange. A gentleness creeping in where there used to be only resignation. When a man named Luc falls one morning near the well, it's Michel who rushes to him first, helps him up, brushes the mud off his knees. No one instructed him. He just knew. You wonder if that's what Guillaume wanted all along. Not obedience, not ritual, just decency, passed hand to hand like fire in a storm. One evening, during a rare moment of warmth, Guillaume tells a story. You're sitting in the chapel, too tired to move. Once, he says, I was asked what I feared most. He pauses. I said, being useless. He smiles then, the faintest curve of his lips. And look at me now, useful after all. Everyone laughs, soft and stunned, because it's true, because he is, because somehow, in this broken place, he became whole. Later that night, as you lie in bed, the bells chiming faintly in the dark, you whisper a prayer not because you expect a reply, but because it feels right. You don't ask for healing, just endurance. Just enough to keep turning toward. You never get used to the cures. No one does. The first time they give you one, it's a dark, sludgy paste made from boiled nettles, vinegar, and what you're fairly certain was goat dung. They don't tell you that part, at least not directly, but Hugo gives you a knowing look when you wrinkle your nose, and you learn quickly not to ask what's in anything. You smear the concoction over a red, cracked patch on your arm, and the burning starts immediately. It feels like being stung by a swarm of bees that's also angry about theology. You grit your teeth and say nothing, because everyone else is watching. No one mocks your pain here, but no one coddles it either. They've all felt it. Some still do. You're not special. You're just new. The thing is, they never stop trying to cure you. That's the part you didn't expect. You assumed you'd be forgotten, left to rot in peace. But instead, there's always another paste, another powder, another bitter tea brewed from roots that smell like old shoes and sadness. Some say the treatments help. Others say they make it worse. Historians still debate whether these remedies were born of science, superstition, or desperation. Probably all three. The old herb woman from the nearest village once brought a vial of urine she claimed belonged to a holy man. Drink it, she said solemnly. 3 sips. At dawn. No one drank it, but they kept it, just in case. That's how hope works here, quiet, ridiculous, indestructible. You begin to learn the ingredients: yarrow for wounds, comfrey for swelling, garlic for everything else. There's always garlic. The colony reeks of it, like a kitchen that forgot it was also a hospital. Isabeau teaches you how to mash the roots properly, not too fine, she says. Leave some bite. You smile. The joke isn't funny, but it's hers, and that's enough. Once a week, the caretaker holds a healing circle. It's just 4 people sitting in a circle with bowls of steaming herbs, breathing in the fumes and chanting half-remembered psalms. No one believes it works, but everyone attends. Not because it heals the body, but because it softens the mind. For a few moments, the air smells less like decay and more like the forest. Sometimes that's enough. There are more severe treatment I took too, boiling the skin, burning the sores. Agnes once endured an experiment with red-hot iron. Didn't help, she says. But I screamed loud enough to scare the lice off half the dormitory. She laughs, then winces. Laughter hurts now. You try not to do it too often. One day, a traveling friar brings a salve made of honey and ashes from the east, he claims, puffing with pride. He doesn't enter the colony. He just leaves the jar at the gate and retreats like he's dropped off a message for the dead. You're chosen to test it. It smells sweet, oddly hopeful. You rub it into your fingers, which have started to curl like dried leaves. The next day, the pain is worse. By the 3rd day, it's better. No one's sure if it's the salve or just your body remembering how to pretend. Either way, you keep the jar. It's something to believe in. That's the real medicine here, belief. Not in God, necessarily, though some cling to that, but belief in something, in morning, in each other, in the tiny, absurd chance that your sores might fade instead of spread. Anselm once said that the best cure he ever found was sleep. Nothing hurts in dreams, he muttered, pulling his hood over his eyes. You envy that. Your dreams are cluttered. Half memory, half prayer. Sometimes you dream of running. But in the dream, you're always slow, always limping. Still, you run. And that, you suppose, is a kind of healing. Some remedies are stranger than others. Someone once tried rubbing frog entrails into their gums. Another buried a hairpin under the fig tree during a full moon. One woman, long gone now, insisted that singing backwards cured her headaches. It didn't. But it made the evenings more entertaining. The caretaker keeps a book, really just a bundle of parchment, where he records all the cures. Some pages are stained with old blood, others with tears. There's a section titled Probably Dangerous, and another titled Did Nothing But Felt Nice. You like that one. You read it sometimes when your hands hurt too much to work. There's something soothing about reading the names of things that failed gently, like someone tried to help, and that effort mattered more than the result. Isabeau starts mixing her own blends. She calls them potions, but with a smirk that lets you know she's joking. Mostly, she makes one for sleep, another for swelling. A third she refuses to name, but you catch her giving it to Agnes during her coughing fits. You ask for one, not because you need it, just to see if she'll say yes. She does. It tastes like old walnuts and sadness. You drink it anyway. One afternoon, Guillaume asks if you believe any of the cures work. You hesitate, then say, sometimes. He nods. That's the only honest answer. He adds, the line between faith and foolishness is thinner than most people like to admit. You don't know if he means the medicine or the colony itself. Probably both. There's a man named Perrin who swears by prayer. He chants over his sores each night, whispering to saints you've never heard of. One day, you ask if it helps. He shrugs. Not my skin, but it helps me. You understand. Sometimes the only healing you get is the feeling of control, of doing something, anything, against the tide. You try your own rituals, holding your breath for 10 seconds before applying salve, whispering Isabeau's name when the pain flares in your back. It's nonsense, but it's yours. The worst part isn't the pain, it's the waiting. Waiting to see if this patch gets better or worse. Waiting to see if someone else wakes up in the morning. Waiting for a new cure, a new hope, a new way to believe you're not beyond saving. You sit by the fire, bowl of herbal mush in hand, and think maybe that's what being human is. Trying anyway, even when it burns, especially when it burns. So you take the salve, the tea, the ash, the garlic, you rub, you swallow, You pray, you wait, and you endure. You start to piece together how people get here not just physically, but through a sequence of silences, glances, and slowly closing doors. No one stumbles into a leper colony by chance. They're pushed, nudged by law, by family, by fear wrapped in religious charity. You remember your own arrival, but it's only now, with weeks behind you, that the full weight of the ritual reveals itself. The path in is narrow. The path out doesn't exist. You begin to notice how the colony isn't just a physical place. It's a decision, made for you and never undone. The first signs of sickness are rarely dramatic. A white patch here, a tingling there. You ask a healer. They shrug. You ask a priest. They look away. Someone whispers that you might have it. That thing, the one no one names directly. You should go, they say. At first, you don't believe it. Who would? But then your neighbor stops shaking your hand. The baker frowns when you reach for bread. The local children stop laughing when you walk past. Your shadow starts to grow too long, and one day, the priest announces a cleansing rite. You're the only one called forward. You're not sick enough to feel ill, but you're sick enough to be feared. Historians still debate whether diagnoses were based on evidence or superstition. Medieval physicians had manuals. To be sure, descriptions of skin texture, hair loss, numbness, but they also listened to dreams, omens, and whispers from the market. Some colonies required papal approval before admittance. Others needed only an accusation. The rituals varied: a public procession, a reading of last rites, or a simple nod from a village elder. One day you were human. The next, you were leprous. That was enough. No second opinion. No appeal. Your story was not unique. You begin hearing them from others. Agnes was sent away after a sore on her hand frightened her employer. She tried hiding it with bandages. One day, her gloves were taken from her. That was that. Peter says he wasn't even sick, just poor, and covered in burns from a kitchen fire. The priest misread the scars, or maybe chose not to ask. Either way, here he is. Anselm found out after a fall. He couldn't feel his foot anymore. He assumed it was a nerve issue. The village doctor agreed. Then someone noticed a discoloration on his neck. They didn't wait for the rest. They gave him a robe and a ride to the nearest colony. Some people arrive alone. Others are delivered like letters no one wants to open. You remember a woman who came with her brother. He promised to stay. By the end of the week, he was gone. Left a bag of onions and a blanket behind. She never spoke again. Mitchell arrived with a note pinned to his coat. You still haven't read it. It's buried under his cot. Sometimes you hear him crumple it, then smooth it back out. You never ask. The colony accepts them all. No questions. No ceremony. You're handed a robe, a bell, and a cot. That's it. And once you're in, you stay. Not because you're chained, but because the world outside has already erased you. You don't exist in the town ledgers anymore. Your family may pray for you, but they do so without speaking your name. One woman whispered that her husband remarried. No one responded. What can you say to that? You wonder what the outside world thinks happens here. Do they imagine moaning in the dark, prayers, madness? Maybe, but what actually happens is laundry, peeling turnips, patching roofs, and waiting. No horror, no drama, just time. Lots of time. Once. You ask the caretaker if anyone's ever left. He hesitates, then says, one man, a monk, long ago, who claimed he'd been misdiagnosed. He appealed to a bishop, then another. He was released, moved to another town. No one heard from him again. Maybe he got well. The caretaker shrugs. Or maybe the new town wasn't as kind as this one. It strikes you then how strange that sounds, calling this place kind. But he's not wrong. For all its rot, its sorrow, its endless, aching sameness, the colony has no cruelty. At least, not deliberate. It's the world outside that cuts. The colony, in its slow decay, somehow mends you. Not your skin, not your strength, but the part of you that needs stillness, the part that stops hoping to be seen and starts noticing others. It's here that you meet people as they are, without masks, or rather, with masks that are stitched openly from their pain. There's a clarity in that, a brutal honesty you never found outside the walls. You begin to forget the calendar. The seasons blur. There's planting, harvest, rain, cold. Repetition becomes your new measurement of time. You learn to appreciate it. The predictability, the lack of surprises. Out there, life was chaos and shame. Here, it's tedium and survival. Somehow, that feels like progress. The only time the outside world truly touches you now is when the priest brings news. A war in the north, a new bishop, a storm that flooded 3 villages. You nod politely, but none of it reaches you. You are untouchable now in the truest, most literal sense. And you start to realize that's the most devastating thing of all. Not being feared, not being diseased, but being forgotten. People assume lepers are dangerous, cursed, contagious, but the deeper curse is being invisible. It's the sound of your name never spoken again, the face that no one remembers, the fact that no one, not even once, has written to you. Isabeau says she used to get letters for the first 2 weeks, then nothing. She burned them all one night. Better than reading them until the ink fades. She says, "You understand. You've stopped hoping for messages, for news, for apologies. You've started hoping for fewer dreams, less memory, more sleep." The caretaker tells you that some colonies used to bury people with stones in their mouths to keep them from speaking in the afterlife. You shudder, not because of the superstition, but because it sounds peaceful. You already feel like you're whispering from under a stone. But despite it all, despite the weight of exile and the numbness in your limbs, you wake each morning, you rise, you eat, you help repair a crumbling wall or stir a pot or hold someone's hand when they're too tired to breathe alone. And in those small acts, you reclaim a kind of presence. You may be forgotten outside, but in here, you are still part of something, a rhythm, a quiet, mournful symphony of endurance, and that, you've decided, is worth staying for. There's something oddly festive about today, though festive means something different here. The air smells less of damp straw and more of roasted grain. Someone found dried apples, and there's even a bit of old wine, likely hoarded by the caretaker for this occasion. It's a feast day not for saints anyone remembers, but for the colony itself, the founding date, or something close to it. No one knows for sure, but they celebrate it anyway, not because of the date, but because celebration itself is rare and must be invented. People wear their cleanest robes. Bells are polished until they squeak like mice. You see Agnes braiding rosemary into her hair, though most of it is gone now. Michelle is scrubbing a bench as if the king himself might arrive. You help carry extra firewood to the communal hall, where someone is preparing soup with more than one vegetable in it. That's enough to call it luxury. You're given a small task dusting off the banner that hangs from the rafters, a faded scrap of cloth with a crude symbol of 2 hands held in prayer. It's stained and torn, but no one minds. It's tradition, and tradition in this place is a shield against the monotony. Historians rarely mention leper colony feasts, but they existed, not often, and not grandly, but enough to stitch some light into the darkness. A festival here isn't about joy. It's about defiance. A way to say we are still here, we still eat, we still sing. You watch as Peter fiddles with his makeshift flute, whittled from a goat bone. The sound he produces is somewhere between music and a bird with indigestion, but it draws smiles all the same. Someone passes around boiled chestnuts. Someone else uncorks the wine just a few sips each, and watered down. But the warmth it brings is unmistakable. Even the caretaker loosens his belt and laughs when Perrin attempts a limping jig to the rhythm of 3 spoons on a bucket. You catch Isabeau's eye from across the room. She smiles, not her usual careful smirk, but a full, soft curve that reaches her eyes. You sit beside her. You don't speak. You don't have to. There's bread between you, and that's its own kind of language now. The bell chorus takes on a different tone during the feast. It's still the same discordant metal, but layered over laughter and clinking bowls. It becomes celebratory, almost musical. Someone begins a chant, an old hymn reworked with nonsense words. Others join, you hum along. The song swells, and for a moment, you forget where you are. You forget what brought you here. There is only warmth, food, breath, and song. Anselm stands at the center and reads from the caretaker's joke ledger, a real thing, filled with the worst puns ever recorded. Why did the leper stop dating, he reads. He was falling apart. Groans echo, followed by reluctant chuckles. Agnes nearly spills her soup from laughing. Someone throws a bit of crust at Anselm, who bows dramatically. You haven't seen this much movement in weeks. Laughter here is sacred, but fragile. Everyone knows it could shatter with the wrong word, the wrong cough, the wrong reminder. So no one talks about death today. No one mentions the bandaged hand or the sudden silence in the cot near the door. Today is for life, for pretending, if only for a few hours, that this is just a village, a strange one, yes, but a place of humans, not remnants. You eat more than usual, not just because there's more food, but because the flavors are mapped to your old life. Pepper on the tongue, sweet apple skin, that hint of mint from something thrown into the pot last minute. You let it coat your mouth, your throat. You swallow slowly, you chew fully. These are the gifts of the feast. Not abundance, but attention. You speak to people you've never spoken to before. Marjorie, who always knits in the corner, turns out to be hilarious. Perrin shows you a trick with his spoon. He can balance it on his chin, though it wobbles like his balance. Everyone claps. Michael stands near the door, eating his bread like it's treasure. He waves at you. You wave back. You wonder what he'll remember of this day, if anything. When the sun begins to fall, everyone gathers in the chapel, not for a sermon, but for stories. This is tradition too. People share tales not of miracles or saints, but of their lives before. Agnes tells of a goose that once followed her to market. Peter speaks of his bakery and the time he accidentally sold salt buns instead of sweet. Isabeau surprises everyone by standing. She speaks quietly about a dog she once had named Blue, who used to curl against her feet during winter. He wouldn't have followed me here, she says, but I like to think he still remembers me. No one laughs, no one mocks. There's only stillness, a few nods. You consider speaking, but your throat tightens, not with fear, but with the realization that your old stories no longer belong to you. They've faded, frayed like old cloth. You don't mind. You're part of this new tapestry now. The fire crackles as the evening winds down. Some sleep early, bell chiming softly as they roll over on creaking cots. Others stay by the hearth, passing the wineskin and humming. You sit beside Isabeau. She's knitting a sock for Michelle. You offer to hold the yarn. She hands it to you without looking. The candle beside you flickers, casting a slow, golden light over her hands. They tremble only slightly. You don't want this moment to end, but it will. That's the nature of peace here. Temporary, borrowed, precious. Eventually, you rise and return to your cot. The bell at your waist tinkles gently as you move. Not mournful, not proud, just present. You lie down, full for once, and listen to the sounds of the colony settling into rest. The wind is soft, the rain holds off, and for a single, perfect breath, you believe this might be enough. That life, however broken, still contains beauty. That the human spirit scarred, exiled, covered in sores can still sing. Outside the gates, your name fades. That's the quiet cruelty no one warns you about, not the sores, not the hunger, not even the isolation, but the slow erosion of who you were. You're not hated, not actively. Hatred at least requires memory. You are simply erased. You hear it in the silence of the townspeople who no longer send food, in the way travelers lower their gaze when passing the edge of the colony, in the priest's voice when he says, they send their prayers, but no names follow. You begin to suspect no one remembers yours. You wonder if your family keeps your belongings or burned them. If they say he was taken instead of he is alive, and slowly, you stop checking the gate. You stop imagining someone might come looking for you. At first, It hurts, this quiet unmaking. Then it hardens. You build a new identity out of routine. You become not who you were, but what you do. Stir the soup, wrap the wounds, repair the sandals. That's who you are now. And strangely, it starts to feel like something close to peace. Not freedom, exactly, but stability. You live within a circle where everything repeats: the coughs, the bells, the rain dripping through the chapel roof. And it's in that repetition that you begin to understand what it means to be forgotten. It means not having to perform anymore, not having to smile when your jaw aches or answer questions that mean nothing. It means you're no longer a character in someone else's life, just your own. Historians write about how lepers were cast out, banished, shunned, but few of them describe the eerie quiet that follows. Not rage, not mourning, just nothing. The world moves on, and you become a space where you used to be. One afternoon, a boy from the town throws a stone near the gate. Not at you, just near. A small act, likely encouraged by older hands. He laughs. You do not move. You pick up the stone, place it beside the others that now line the entryway. A little pile of memory, of recognition, however cruel. Peter sees you do it and nods. At least he saw you. He says, you don't know if that's better or worse. You dream, sometimes, of walking back into your village, just appearing on the edge of the road, bell removed, robe discarded. You wonder what they'd say. Would they gasp, apologize, pretend not to know you, but then you remember you couldn't walk far enough now. Your feet swell when it rains. Your knees lock. One day of walking would undo you. So you stay. Not because you must, but because there's nowhere else left that fits your shape. A merchant comes once every few weeks. He sets his cart near the boundary, doesn't speak, doesn't look up, just waits. You leave coins in a clay bowl. He takes them without touching the edges. He once sold you a knife. The next visit, he refused to sell anything. The bishop says we shouldn't encourage them. He muttered, you said nothing. You still carry the knife, not for defense, just for peeling roots. One day, a woman approaches the fence, middle-aged, cloaked, uncertain. She peers through the slats as if trying to see something in the fog. You recognize the way she stands, her hands. Then it hits you. She looks like your sister, the shape of her nose, the way she crosses her arms. You step closer, slowly. She steps back, doesn't run, just retreats. She leaves a bundle, herbs, linen, and a piece of bread wrapped in wax cloth. She does not speak. You do not call out. You watch her walk away. You do not cry. Later, you eat the bread. You don't tell anyone. It tastes like your old kitchen, like honey and memory. That night, your dreams are loud again. Faces, names, doors. You wake shivering. Isabeau places a hand on your shoulder. You tell her nothing. She says nothing. That's the comfort here. Silence can mean many things. You keep the cloth, fold it, tuck it under your bedding, not because of what it is, but because of what it almost was. You wonder if that woman will come back. She doesn't. The herbs dry out, the bread is gone, but the cloth remains. Your only relic of a world that stopped naming you. It becomes clear, over time, that the greatest pain of the colony isn't disease. It's the fact that the healthy forget the sick, but the sick never forget the healthy. You remember the sound of your mother's voice when she called you in for supper, the exact squeak of the barn door, the smell of leather warmed by sun, and none of it forgets you back, but none of it acknowledges you either. You begin carving names into the chapel bench, not full names, just initials. Symbols, the language of remembering without claiming. Peter adds one, then Agnes. Soon, the bench is full of quiet stories. Guillaume notices, says nothing, just runs his fingers along the carvings when he passes, as if reading a hymn. One morning, Michelle asks you if you remember what your home looked like. You pause, then say, only in pieces. He nods, as if that's the only answer he expected. Me too, he says. He walks away before you can ask what pieces. You look at the colony differently now, less like a prison, more like a sanctuary for the lost pages of life. Every person here is a paragraph that got torn out of a story mid-sentence, and yet, together, you begin to write something new, a slow manuscript of endurance, of laughter between wounds, of names no longer spoken aloud, but carved into habits, into soup recipes, into the way you hold each other's gaze just a second longer than needed. You still wear your bell. You still flinch when you hear the merchant's horse, but you no longer check the gate. You no longer dream of being welcomed back, because now you understand the world didn't reject you because you were broken. It rejected you because you made its illusion of wholeness uncomfortable. The colony didn't fix that, but it gave you a place where truth could breathe. And in that breath, you remember you are not nothing. You are not gone. You are not unmade. You are simply not theirs anymore. The roof leaks. You knew that already, but today it seems more intentional. The rain finds every weakness in the thatching and exploits it like a clever child. Drips fall at regular intervals onto beds, onto bowls, onto your forehead as you lie staring up at the warped beams. The dormitory smells of wet wool, mold, and faint despair. You've grown used to it, but not immune. No one complains. Complaints don't fix holes. Complaints don't stop the wind. You rise and shuffle toward the edge of the building with a wooden bucket. Place it beneath the loudest drip and move your cot away with a grunt. Peter is already bailing out his corner, muttering about rats learning to swim. Someone sneezes. You hear coughing in the distance. Nothing new, just another wet morning. The colony's buildings are not built to last. Most are patched together from whatever could be scrounged planks from abandoned barns, stones from collapsed walls, rusted nails pulled from furniture long surrendered to rot. It's a miracle anything stands upright at all. The communal hall leans eastward like it's listening to the wind. The chapel roof is held together with a lattice of rope and prayer. Your own quarters shared with 7 others has a floor that dips in the middle like a forgotten spoon. When it rains, water pools there. Sometimes frogs join you. You don't mind them. They're quiet company. Historians rarely write about the architecture of leper colonies, except to say it was simple or modest. That's a polite way of saying barely habitable. But inside this wreckage, you begin to see a strange order. The way cloth is hung to block drafts, the stones arranged around the fire to keep sparks from reaching beds, the little ledges carved into beams where people hide dry herbs, cracked spoons, even letters. There's beauty here, not grand, not planned, but earned. The beauty of survival through ingenuity. One afternoon, you help repair a shutter. It's been flapping for days, threatening to fly off like a bird that never learned how to perch. You and Anselm take turns hammering it back into place using bent nails and a splintered mallet. The wood splits twice. You mutter something under your breath. He just smiles. Better broken and held together than never used, he says. You don't know if he means the shutter or himself. Either way, you nod. The work takes hours. Your hands blister. Your back screams. But by evening, the wind no longer howls through the gap. People nod in appreciation as they pass. No words, just small acknowledgments. That's how praise works here, brief, quiet, precious. You sit by the hearth with Isabeau, feet propped on a log, steam rising from a tin mug filled with whatever passes for tea. She gestures toward the patch in the ceiling above your cot, where you'd stuffed an old robe to stop the dripping. You're becoming a real craftsman, she teases. I accept tips in bread and admiration. You reply, she snorts. You count that as a win. During the colder months, the leaks become more dangerous. Water turns to ice, the floors slick over, you see more falls, more bruises. Michel slips one morning and cracks his lip open, blood on snow. The contrast is cruel. You help him to his feet, he doesn't cry. He just wipes his mouth and mutters, "Stupid floor." You want to laugh. You don't. You carry him to the fire instead. Wrap him in a blanket. He leans into you without speaking. The caretaker once said the buildings breathe. When the walls moan, it means they're still alive. You hear those groans, often wood swelling, shrinking, complaining in its own language. You begin to understand it. Which joints are likely to give? Which planks can bear weight? Which door hinges sing before they snap? In the town you came from, Buildings were silent. Here, they speak, loudly, constantly. Agnes begins collecting moss to stuff between the beams. It helps with the wind. She teaches you how to pack it tight and seal it with mud. You become moss experts. You even name your best patches. This one's Gregory. She says one day, he's particularly stubborn. You find yourself talking to the moss sometimes, not out of madness, out of habit. Everything here becomes company eventually. The wind, the wood, the moss, the frogs. They don't judge. They just remain. You learn to mend what cannot be replaced. Broken bench. Add a rock to prop the leg. Torn robe. Stitch it with hair if you have to. A cracked bowl is still a bowl if you hold it right. The buildings teach you patience, humility, respect for the barely functional. One night, a beam gives out in the dormitory. No one's hurt, but everyone wakes. Dust fills the air. Coughs echo. The roof groans. You all move your cots closer together, for warmth, for safety, for company. Michelle curls beside you. Isabeau lies just beyond, her breath a steady rhythm. In the dark, the broken ceiling reveals a patch of stars. You hadn't seen them in weeks. The storm must have cleared. You stare up, the cold forgotten, and feel something close to awe. Not at the stars, at the roof, that it broke gently, that it didn't kill anyone, that, even in collapse, it had mercy. You whisper thank you into the wood, not sure who you're thanking, just grateful to have something to say. The next morning, repairs begin. No one waits, no one complains. Hugo brings rope. Perrin finds 2 beams near the garden. You dig through old storage for nails. The colony moves as one organism, now slow, determined, cooperative. No one leads. No one directs. Everyone knows what needs to be done. You lift, you hold, you hammer. The new beam fits poorly. No one minds. It holds. That's all that matters. By evening, the dormitory stands again, swaying slightly, but upright. You sit in the chapel afterward, your hands raw, your body aching. Guillaume nods at you as he lights a candle. They built cathedrals to last forever, he says softly. We build for the next wind. You think that's more honest, more beautiful? The chapel itself isn't immune to time. Its windows are patched with parchment. Its door squeals like a child with a stubbed toe. But it endures, like you, like all of you. In this place, everything is cracked, but nothing is abandoned. Even the ruins are loved, and that, you think, is what separates you from the world outside. They threw you away. Here, you are kept. Here, even broken roofs are worth fixing. You begin to understand the rules here, unwritten, unspoken, but deeply embedded in every step you take and every breath you share. They're not the kind of rules that are enforced with punishment, but the kind that settle like dust in the corners of the mind. You live like a monk, not because you chose to, but because the rhythm of this place demands it. Wake at dawn, share your food, carry your share, hold your tongue when words won't help, suffer quietly, comfort even quieter. It's not that joy isn't allowed, only that it's whispered rather than shouted, shared in sideways glances and half smiles over lentil stew. Life in the colony doesn't afford the indulgence of excess. Everything is rationed, including emotion. You learn to live within these limits, and over time, you come to see them not as restrictions, but as structure bones within the body of your days. The chapel bells, ironically distinct from the bells you wear, mark time loosely. Prayers are said at dawn, at midday, and at dusk, but attendance is not compulsory. Still, nearly everyone comes, not out of piety, but because the act of gathering has a gravitational pull. There's something about breathing the same dust, hearing the same coughing, and watching the same candle sputter that unites you more deeply than doctrine. Guillaume rarely gives sermons now. He simply reads psalms, stories, once even a list of herbs. You remember that day because he read them like poetry, and somehow it worked. Everyone sat still, as if each leaf and root had a soul of its own. That's the kind of holiness that survives here. Not thundering voices from the pulpit, but quiet reverence for small things. Some days, you skip prayers, not out of rebellion, just fatigue. On those days, you sweep, or scrub, or patch. Monastic work, minus the sainthood. No one praises you for it. No one needs to. Praise is unnecessary when everyone suffers together. Still, you notice small gestures. A bowl placed beside your cot without a word. A dry scrap of cloth left for your feet. A shoulder that stays near just a little longer than needed. These are the new sacraments. Not bread and wine, but silence and presence. You learn to pray without speaking, to ask without expecting, to give without being seen. And that, you realize, is the heart of this place, not punishment, not exile, but a form of unspectacular sanctity. Historians often describe leper colonies as prisons or hospitals, but they rarely acknowledge what they most resemble a monastery, minus the glory. You don't wear a habit, you wear rags. Your chants are coughs. Your offerings are whatever your hands can manage, but the spirit is the same. Withdrawal from the world, a refocusing inward, and maybe, just maybe, something holy born of suffering. Agnes jokes that she's the abbess. No one disagrees. She knows everyone's business, assigns chores when no one else will, and threatens to dump water on Peter when he dozes off during chapel. Her authority is natural, not earned by title, but by sheer persistence. You once saw her carry a sack of onions that was nearly her weight. No one stopped her. We all knew better. Anselm, for his part, has become something like a scribe. He keeps a record of daily happenings, not in a formal book, but on scraps of cloth, scratched with charcoal or ink made from boiled walnut shells. It's not for posterity. It's for remembering. When someone dies, he writes their name. When someone new arrives, he marks the date. When the weather shifts, he draws little clouds or suns or rain streaks. You see him sometimes, sitting alone, sketching a foot with missing toes, a spoon with a cracked handle. His art is crude, but full of care. You think it may be the truest kind of scripture? Even Michel has his role now. He tends the fire in the chapel, quietly sweeping ashes, adding kindling, watching the flame as if it might speak to him. He rarely speaks, but when he does, it matters. One evening, after a long silence, he whispered to you, "The fire never dies. It just hides." You didn't reply. You didn't need to. You sit with Isabeau most nights now. You help her with mending. She hums when she sews, a tune without words, probably older than memory. You ask once where she learned it. She shrugs. "From my mother? Or maybe from the wind," she adds. "Same thing. Really, you think she might be right. The dormitory has developed its own rituals. Someone lights the candle each night in the same corner. Someone else checks the bucket. You all share a bowl of broth, even if there's little to share. If someone coughs too hard, a hand appears with a cloth. If someone dreams loudly, no one scolds them. This is your cloister, your convent. The rule is not written, but known. Be kind, be useful, be quiet. Guillaume says once that he believes heaven is just a room like this, but with fewer leaks. You tell him. Then I hope the chairs are better. He laughs until he coughs. You don't know how long he has. You've stopped counting days. They blur anyway. Seasons pass through the windows like polite guests. The fig tree is budding again. The moss you and Agnes stuffed between the beams has sprouted tiny flowers. They're purple. You name them. She rolls her eyes. "We're not monks," she mutters. "We're just tired." Same thing. You reply. She doesn't argue. At night, you lie in bed and count breaths. Not your own others. The rhythmic chorus of sleep and sickness. The music of the colony. The bells have stopped clanging. People still wear them, but the sound no longer grates. It's just background now. A reminder that the world spins, even here. And in this stillness, this repetition, this unglamorous devotion to survival, you begin to feel something like grace. Not the kind that descends in blinding light, the kind that grows like mold in a damp chapel quiet, persistent, unseen. You understand now why some chose this life. Not because they had to, because there's peace in the rules, in the ritual, in the knowing that your days are small but real, that your suffering is shared, that even if the world forgets you, you have not forgotten how to care. And that, you think, might be enough. You hear the hooves before you see him slow, deliberate, as if even the horse knows it should tread lightly here. The bishop has come. Word spreads fast through the colony, not with shouts, but with the shuffle of feet and the creaking of doors being pushed open for the first time in weeks. It's not often someone from that world visits this one, and when they do, it brings with it a strange mixture of dread and absurd hope. You're in the garden when it happens, pulling up the last of the winter onions, their roots clinging to soil like they don't want to be displaced. Agnes pokes her head out of the kitchen and mutters, "He's here. Try not to look too alive." You chuckle. It's the first real laugh you've had all week. By the time you join the others at the edge of the courtyard, the bishop has dismounted and is already speaking to Father Guillaume. His robes are clean, his boots polished. He smells faintly of incense and horse. Everything about him glows with health. You wonder if he's afraid to breathe. He carries a silver cross and a pouch that jingles. The last bishop came 4 years ago. Someone says he stayed for less than an hour, read a psalm, gave a coin, rode off. This one seems different, taller, more solemn. His face, though pale, doesn't shift into revulsion when he meets your eyes. A miracle already. He greets Guillaume with a bow of the head, respectful but distant, and then turns to the rest of you, my brothers and sisters. He begins, you nearly laugh again. The phrase feels foreign here, like calling a dying tree a cathedral. Still, you appreciate the effort. He speaks of mercy, of God's plan, of the burden of suffering carried with grace. He quotes scripture. You don't hear most of it. You're too distracted by the way his fingers twitch nervously every time someone coughs. Behind you, Peter clears his throat deliberately. The bishop flinches. You resist the urge to applaud. After his speech, he offers small blessings. A tap on the shoulder, a nod. Some receive him eagerly, bowing their heads. Others hang back, unwilling to be touched even by a man of the cloth. You do neither. You stand still. When he reaches you, his eyes linger, not with pity, with curiosity, as if trying to remember where he's seen a face like yours before. He moves on. You don't feel different. You didn't expect to. Once the formalities end, he retreats into the chapel with Guillaume. A few moments later, the caretaker begins shuffling nervously through the dormitory, muttering, "Hide the wine." Anselm chuckles beside you. Nothing says holy visit like pretending we're more miserable than we are. Inside, the bishop's voice rises. You can't make out the words. Something about order, about records. You catch discipline and donations. Guillaume responds calmly. Eventually, they emerge again. The bishop carries a list. He says he will be making recommendations, that more assistance may be sent, that new blankets might arrive before winter. You know better than to believe any of it. Still, you nod. It's the polite thing to do. Before he leaves, he distributes coins, one to each of you. The metal is cold, stamped with the image of a saint you don't recognize. You wonder what the going price for your suffering is these days? Isabeau slips hers into her sleeve without looking. Agnes drops hers down the well. "Bless the bucket," she mutters. The bishop rides away with the same solemnity with which he arrived. You watch until the dust settles behind his horse. Then you return to the garden. The onions won't pull themselves. Later that evening, Guillaume gathers a few of you for tea. You sit in the chapel, the light dim, the air thick with the scent of dried rosemary and tired wood smoke. He meant well, Guillaume says quietly. That's often more dangerous than hatred. You sip your tea. It tastes like boiled mint and resignation. Do you think he'll send help, someone asks? Guillaume shrugs. They might send wine. They rarely send blankets. That gets a few laughs. Perrin suggests writing him a letter, "Dear Bishop, thank you for the sermon. Please send firewood and forgiveness." No one writes it, but everyone repeats the line for days. You carry your coin in your pocket for a while, unsure what to do with it. Eventually, you leave it by Beatrix's grave. She always hated being cold. Michael finds another coin someone dropped and gives it to Anselm, who carves it into a rough medallion. He hangs it from a string above the dormitory entrance. For protection, he says. From bishops, Agnes asks. From believing in them too much, he replies, and that's how it is. The visit becomes another story in the long, strange book of your life here, occasionally referenced, but never dwelled on. The buildings creak, the beds sag, the stew simmers, the rules resume. Still, something lingers. Not hope, exactly. Not even change. Just a crack in the wall that wasn't there before. A reminder that the outside world still has eyes, even if it rarely looks long enough to see. Guillaume seems quieter after the visit. You ask him if something's wrong. I was reminded, he says slowly, how far the world will go to appear generous while staying comfortably distant. You think of the bishop's coin in Beatrix's grave. You think of how no one followed up. No blankets arrived, no messages, no wine, just the memory of polished boots leaving prints in the mud. But somehow, the colony feels stronger afterward, as if being observed made you all double down on your existence. You start fixing the chapel bench. Isabeau plants onions near the fig tree. Agnes reorganizes the herb stores. Life resumes, not out of optimism, but insistence. You exist, even when unnoticed. You matter, even when forgotten. You live, even when no one returns your gaze. And when night falls and the wind whispers through the gaps in the shutters, you close your eyes and think, let them forget. We remember each other, and that will be enough. You wouldn't expect children in a place like this, but there are a few scattered like weeds between the cracks of fate. Michelle, of course, but also a girl named Eloise who showed up one autumn, wrapped in 2 cloaks and silence. She never said who brought her. She didn't have to. Everyone could guess. Some families brought their sick with trembling hands and eyes full of guilt. Others dropped them off like unwanted parcels and vanished before the gate swung closed. Eloise didn't speak for nearly 2 weeks, though she followed Agnes around like a shadow. Eventually, she started humming tuneless at first, then with structure, then came words, then came laughter, soft, like a question. There's something impossibly fragile about a child here, not just because of their bodies small and at war with themselves, but because of what they represent. A future where no one expects one. A reminder that time still moves forward, even in a place built for waiting. The colony doesn't have a school. There's no formal learning, but the children are always watching, always mimicking. Michael copies Anselm's careful writing on bits of discarded parchment. Heloise tries to stir stew like Agnes, though she can barely reach the pot. They learn not from chalkboards, but from footsteps in silence and the subtle choreography of survival. You see it in how they step around the weakest sleepers, how they offer the driest spots of floor without prompting. It's not innocence they carry, but a kind of wisdom born from being ignored too early. One afternoon, you find Michel carving something behind the chapel. You expect a bird or flower his usual, but it's a person. A figure bent over, holding a child's hand. You ask if it's him and Anselm. He shrugs. Could be anyone, he says. But he smiles when he says it. Heloise starts collecting pebbles, smooth ones, the kind that feel like secrets in your palm. She lines them up in the windowsill beside her cot, 1 for each day. She tells you, when I get to 100, I'll plant them. You don't ask what she thinks will grow. Some dreams are meant to be left untouched. The older residents treat the children gently, but not delicately. No one coos. No one shields them from hard truths. It's not out of coldness, but respect. In a place like this, pretending doesn't help. Heloise knows how to bandage a wound. Michelle knows how to scrape the mold off bread without wasting the soft middle. They don't complain about the cold. They share their blankets without being asked. You begin to wonder if they're stronger than the rest of you, or maybe just less broken, or maybe broken differently. Historians rarely mention children in leper colonies. It doesn't fit the narrative. Tragedy is easier to digest when it happens to the old, the already worn out. Children complicate the story. They demand too much feeling. But the truth is, They were always here. Illness doesn't skip the young, and families torn by shame or law or desperation have always made impossible choices. Eloise's left hand is twisted. Her fingers curl like vines around a twig. She uses the other for everything. When you offer to help her tie her cloak, she frowns. I can do it. She can, slowly, stubbornly, and with more skill than you expected. Michel, by contrast, is gentle, quiet. He picks at splinters in the chapel bench and puts them in a small pouch. One day, he whispers, I'll burn them all. Make a fire no one can see. You nod. You don't ask why. Some metaphors are private. The colony makes space for them without planning to. They are folded into the rhythm. Michel feeds the fire each morning. Eloise delivers herbs between the kitchen and the sick room. They become threads in the fabric, and the fabric adjusts. You see it most clearly in Agnes. She watches over them like a reluctant hen gruff, blunt, but always alert. When Eloise scrapes her knee, Agnes scolds the floorboards. When Michel skips a meal, she appears with a boiled egg and a threat. If you waste this, she growls, I'll make you eat 2 tomorrow. They never do. Father Guillaume speaks to them like they're adults, but softer. He tells them old fables, animals who make strange bargains, ghosts who ask riddles. They listen, wide-eyed, faces catching the flicker of candlelight as if trying to memorize every word. Sometimes you join them, not to listen to the story, but to watch their faces so full of attention, of hunger for something more than survival. You realize you've forgotten what that looked like. One evening, a storm hits hard, the wind tears at the shutters, and the rain beats like fists on the roof. You huddle close in the dormitory, blankets shared, the air thick with damp breath and tension. Michel curls beside you. Eloise sleeps beside Agnes, hand gripping the edge of her robe like a root anchoring itself in earth. In the morning, a tree has fallen near the chapel. No damage, but the garden path is blocked. You all work to clear it, Anselm with his axe, Perrin with a borrowed saw, even Isabeau, pulling branches with steady hands. Michel tries to help, dragging twigs with solemn precision. Eloise sorts them by size. You don't stop them. Their work is slow, but sure. They earn their place here, same as everyone else. That night, you sit by the fire and listen to them talk. Not about disease, not about loss, but about stars and moss and what frogs dream about. You laugh. They don't notice. That's fine. Their world is still full of questions. Yours has become a place of quiet answers. But tonight, you share it with them. And it feels like prayer. Guillaume watches them too. His face is unreadable. Later, he tells you, they're the only ones who haven't turned bitter. You nod. They don't know how, you say. He sighs. Let's hope they never learn. But you both know the world doesn't spare anyone. Especially not here. Still, for now, the children remain. They live among ghosts, but haven't become them. They walk through broken halls and still find stories in the shadows. They hum, they question, they dream. And because of that, because they keep dreaming, you begin to believe again. Not in healing, not in return, but in presence. In small hands carrying pebbles, in quiet defiance, in the strange, fierce light of life that refuses to go out. The disease creeps slowly. That's the trick of it. The cruelty, it doesn't strike like lightning, but settles in like fog, quiet, consistent, impossible to outrun. You wake one morning and notice your fingertips are more numb than usual. You press them together, feel nothing. You scratch your forearm, but your skin doesn't flinch. You tell yourself it's the cold. You know it's not. Later, while stirring the morning pot, the ladle slips from your hand and clatters to the floor. Everyone turns. No one speaks. You pick it up, hand trembling. There's no blood, just shame. You keep working, keep pretending, but the awareness has returned your body. Once a loyal vessel is now a map slowly losing its lines. You think back to when you first arrived, how you believed the worst pain would be the wounds, the sores, the disfigurement, but that was naive. The worst pain is absence, the vanishing of sensation, the silence of your own flesh. At least with pain, you still feel alive. But this is like being slowly edited out of yourself. Historians write about leprosy clinically, about nerves, bacteria, transmission. They chart the external symptoms with academic detachment, but they rarely talk about the internal erosion, the way you start to doubt whether your limbs still belong to you, the way you begin to watch your hands like they're strangers. The colony adapts, of course, always. You learn to wrap cloth around tools for easier grip. You carry things in your arms instead of your hands. You begin tying your robe differently, looser. You let Isabeau braid your hair, not out of vanity, but because you can't manage it anymore. She does it gently, never commenting on the tremor in your shoulders. Sometimes she braids it the wrong way, on purpose, just to make you laugh. You notice Agnes wears gloves more often now, not for warmth, to hide. Her fingers are gnarled, clawed inward. She still cooks, still leads, but you see the stiffness in her movements. You don't mention it. She wouldn't want you to. There's a quiet agreement in the colony. You acknowledge decline only when necessary. Until then, you let each other hold on to whatever illusion remains. Dignity, here, is the right to pretend. Guillaume's cough has worsened. He leans more on the lectern now, his voice rasping through prayers. But he never misses chapel, not even when his legs shake. Anselm offered to read for him once. He refused. "If I stop speaking," he said, "I stop being." That's what illness does here. It tests your definition of self. When does the loss become too much? When does your name no longer apply to what's left of you? You don't know, not yet, but the line draws closer. One night, you wake with your left leg numb from thigh to heel. Panic blooms in your chest, hot and sudden. You press your hands to your skin, dig your nails in, desperate to feel something, anything. Nothing comes. You sob, not from pain, but the absence of it. Michel wakes and comes to your side. He doesn't speak. He just curls beside you, his bell tucked under his chin, like it might keep the dark away. You fall asleep eventually, but the numbness doesn't. It stays. A new companion. Heloise begins limping, not always, just when tired. She doesn't mention it. Neither do you. But one morning, she leaves her shoe behind. Doesn't realize until hours later. The caretaker finds it and places it beside her cot. She stares at it like it's a betrayal. No one says a word. You all just breathe. That's how it goes. One piece at a time. Slow, quiet losses. A finger that won't bend. A nose that bleeds and won't stop. A breath that wheezes. A voice that fades. Still, you keep going. Because what else is there? You work. You mend. You sing. The chorus grows softer each month. But it sings. There's no ceremony for decline. No feast. No warning. Just another morning where you find your spoon too heavy or your blanket too light. Sometimes someone vanishes from the garden path, and later their cot lies empty. No questions. Just rearranged beds. You begin to plan for your own absence, not your death, but your disappearance. You teach Michel how to tend the fire alone. You leave notes with Isabeau on how to make the poultice that helps your chest. You scratch a small X under the plank where you hide your extra robe, in case someone else needs it someday. You don't do this because you expect to vanish soon. You do it because eventually, you will. Everyone does. Even the strongest. Even Guillaume. One morning, the chapel is empty, the fire cold. You find him in his room, sitting upright, eyes open but unfocused. He's not dead. Not quite. But his voice is gone. His body is still. His hands limp. You touch his wrist. He blinks, slow and confused. Anselm comes, then Agnes, then Isabeau. You all sit quietly. There's no plan for this. Eventually, you move him to his cot, cover him with a blanket, and wait. That's all you can do. You take turns watching him, feeding him what little he can swallow, whispering prayers, not to him, not for him, just prayers. Michelle asks if he'll get better. You want to say yes, you want to say something, but you don't. You just place your hand over his and squeeze. He squeezes back. That's enough. Days pass, then a week. Guillaume doesn't speak again, but he hums, once, during prayer, a single, breathless note. You all freeze, then continue. That hum carries more meaning than any sermon. The colony shifts, quietly, roles realign. You lead the prayers now, though your voice cracks. Agnes manages the herbs. Anselm teaches Eloise how to draw a straight line with shaking hands. Life continues, unraveling and repairing itself in the same motion. One afternoon, while gathering moss for insulation, your foot gives out. You fall. Hard. The impact sends a jolt through your spine, and for a moment, you can't move. Isabeau is there within seconds. She helps you up, doesn't ask if you're okay, doesn't offer comfort, just brushes the mud from your robe and says, "It's not your time yet." You nod, because she's right. Later, you lie awake and realize the numbness has reached your shoulder. You close your eyes and whisper to no one, "Please stop there." But you know it won't. It never does. The disease creeps, but so do you. You move forward, drag yourself through each task, each prayer, each breath. You hold a child's hand. You sweep a floor. You hum a forgotten tune. And in those moments, you still exist, still belong, still matter, even if only here, even if only now. You are still yourself, diminished, aching, invisible to the world, but whole in the eyes of those who know how to see. The digging begins before sunrise, as it always does, quietly, methodically. You don't use shovels, not proper ones. At least, there are only two in the colony, both half-splintered and dull at the edge. So most of the work is done with hand tools, broken spades, chipped ladles, even a bent frying pan. You've used it before. It works better than you'd expect. Today, it's Peter and Anselm digging, while you carry stones to line the bottom. Michel follows behind with a small bundle of cloth, not quite understanding, not fully wanting to. The burial isn't for someone you knew well. A man named Elias. He didn't speak much. He came late in the winter, coughed through spring, and vanished into the sheets last night with barely a sound. You sat by his side the day before. He had a necklace with 3 tiny beads. You asked what they meant. He smiled but didn't answer. That was enough. In the colony, not all deaths bring mourning. Some bring relief. Not because anyone is glad, but because suffering has a way of distorting time. There's a mercy in the ending. Still, every burial is personal. There's no mortician, no cleric to chant the rite. There's only you, and whoever else is strong enough to hold a spade without shaking. The grave is dug near the back wall of the chapel garden. The soil there is softer, as if it's grown used to receiving the weight of worn-out flesh. This will be the 4th grave this month. You try not to think about that. Graves aren't marked with names. There aren't enough stones. Sometimes someone ties a ribbon around a nearby root. Sometimes someone carves a letter into the bark of the fig tree. Sometimes nothing is left but the shape of turned earth. Today, Michel places a pebble beside the hole before anything else is done. So he won't feel alone, he says. You nod. It's a tradition now, even if it wasn't before. Agnes brings a cloth soaked in rosemary and vinegar. She helps wrap the body. It's not embalming, there's no need. The ground is hungry and quiet. The cloth is folded with care, the way you might wrap a newborn. Death in the colony is never clinical. It's domestic. Heloise places a wilted sprig of lavender beside the bundle. She doesn't cry. She just stands very still. Later, when the sun is finally above the trees, the body is lowered in, not with ceremony, but with softness. The bundle barely makes a sound as it touches the earth. Perrin whispers a psalm. His voice is hoarse, the words fractured by memory. It doesn't matter. Everyone knows the rhythm. You whisper along. You always do. Not for the dead, for the living. Guillaume is wheeled out in his chair by Anselm. He says nothing, but he lifts a hand in blessing. That's more than enough. He hasn't spoken in weeks. The blessing feels like thunder. Afterward, the grave is covered. Stones are laid atop, not to weigh it down, but to mark the moment. Not a warning, a reminder. He was here, Agnes says simply, and now he rests. That's the only eulogy. It's perfect. You walk back in silence, the bells on your hips clinking in soft rhythm. The colony resumes its pattern, laundry flutters, soup simmers. A cot is quietly cleared and refilled with blankets. You take Elias's spoon and place it in the drawer with the others. Someone will need it. There are no heirlooms here, only tools passed forward. Death doesn't disrupt life here. It folds into it. You think of your own grave, where it might be, who might dig it, what cloth might wrap you. There's something strange about knowing the exact shape of your future. Not frightening, just small, contained, manageable. In the world outside, death is a guest that knocks unexpectedly. Here, it's already seated at the table. You pass it bread. You learn to live beside it. That evening, you sit beside Isabeau under the fig tree. She holds a piece of cloth in her lap, stitching it with trembling hands. "What are you making, you ask?" "Nothing," she replies. "I just want to sew something that isn't falling apart." You understand. The need to create without a function? Just to say I was here, I made this, I left something. You tell her about the grave. She nods, continues stitching. "He always coughed when he laughed," she says. "I like that about him. It's the most anyone has ever said about Elias." You're glad she did. Later, you find Michel adding another pebble to his windowsill. "For Elias," he says, "so he doesn't forget us." You want to correct him to say it's us who might forget him, but you don't. His version is kinder, more human. That night, the dormitory is still. The wind doesn't rattle the shutters. The frogs are quiet. You lie awake, thinking not about dying, but about being buried by hands that know you. About being remembered not by your old name, not by titles or roles, but by gestures, a spoon, a stitch, a pebble. The next morning, you rise and gather mint from the garden. You crush it with oil and leave a small bowl by Guillaume's cot. He blinks at you, nods. You sit for a while, just listening to his breath. It's uneven, but present. Later, Eloise draws in the dirt with a stick, little shapes that spiral and repeat. "These are the ways back," she whispers. In case we forget, you kneel beside her, back to what she shrugs. Anything, just back. You let her draw. You let yourself believe. That's what graves do here. Not end things. They anchor them. They say even in silence, you mattered. Even in pain, you were seen. Even in the smallest life, something took root. That evening, you help Michel clean the chapel floor. He hums a tune you don't recognize. You hum along anyway. The sun casts long shadows across the stone. Dust floats in golden beams. The air smells of mint and ash. You breathe. You continue, because someone must. You wake before the bells today, not the ones tied to robes, but the chapel bell, the old iron one that rarely rings anymore. It hangs from a crooked beam over the garden wall, more rust than metal now, swaying with a lopsided dignity. You woke not from sound, but from stillness, the kind of hush that only happens after too many days of coughing, too many nights of murmured prayers that end mid-sentence. The air feels thick, unmoving. The sky is pale, not cloudy, not clear, just indifferent. You dress slowly. Your joints ache more than usual. Your fingers feel hollow, like they belong to someone else. You stretch them one by one, listen to the quiet cracks. Today, you think, something will change. You step into the main hall, and the first thing you see is Anselm by Guillaume's cot. He isn't speaking, just sitting. Guillaume's eyes are closed, his chest still. There's no panic, no scene. Just the end of something that lasted longer than it had any right to. You don't cry. Neither does Anselm. Agnes arrives with a basin and cloth. Silent as a breath, Michael walks in, sees the still form, and walks back out again. He already knows. Everyone does. This is not the first body. It will not be the last. But this one was the voice in the dark, the hand that stayed steady. the face that listened when you no longer remembered how to speak. And now, that voice is gone. That silence grows. You help carry the body to the chapel. It feels heavier than it should. Maybe because it held so many names, so many secrets. Or maybe because you're all older now, wearier. The candlelight flickers as you lay him out. You dress him in his cleanest robe. Isabeau finds a length of white cloth to wrap around his shoulders. Perrin offers his own belt to tie it closed. No one asks why. You all just do. There's no priest to read rites. There's no music. But there is presence. There is stillness. And in that stillness, there is love. Later, Eloise comes with a sprig of rosemary and places it by his feet, so he remembers where to walk. She says, Agnes lights 3 candles. One falls over. No one moves to fix it. The wax runs. And that's fine. The floor remembers too. You dig again. The same garden plot. The same tired tools. The earth gives way more easily than usual, as if it recognizes this man, as if it wants him. The grave is deeper than most. Anselm insists. He was heavy with memory. He says, we should make space for that. Michael nods. He places 3 stones at the bottom before the body is lowered in. Agnes kneels beside the grave and murmurs something none of you catch. Perhaps it wasn't for you. Perhaps it wasn't even in words. You bury Guillaume beneath warm soil and cold light. You mark the grave not with a name, but with a chair. The one he always sat in, carved roughly, now leaning slightly beside the fig tree. Anyone who passes will know. That evening, the colony is quiet in a new way. Not mournful, not broken, just aware. You all move slower, softer. Someone cooks too much soup. No one finishes it. You sit by the fire, your hands empty. Isabeau braids your hair, the strands falling like dry grass. Michelle holds the end of the braid while she ties it. It feels ceremonial, like preparation, the kind people used to do before battle or before sleep. You think back to your first day here, the itching robe, the bell at your waist, the way no one looked at you. And now, you look around and see 100 looks returned, all tired, all worn, all real. You've become something here, not in the eyes of the world, but in the soil, in the hands you've held, in the spoons you've passed. Your fingers are mostly numb now. Your feet ache even when you lie down, but you still carry water, still tell stories, still whisper prayers you've never read from a book. You wonder how much longer you have, not in fear, just in curiosity. The way someone might wonder when the last fig will fall before winter. You sleep that night with the window open. The air is cold. You welcome it. You dream of walking, not running, just walking, steadily, with the sound of bells in the distance not alarming, just present. You see Guillaume, not as he was at the end, but as he was when he laughed. That one time the goat stole his bread. He doesn't speak. He just smiles. The next morning, you wake slowly. No one is moving yet. The chapel is still dark. You sit up and feel the stiffness in your neck, your knees, but something else too. A peace, deep and strange. You rise, wrap yourself in the thickest robe you have, and step outside. The garden is covered in dew. The moss between the stones glows faintly in the dawn. You hear someone behind you, Michel. He's holding a new pebble. For Guillaume, he says. You nod. You watch him place it on the chair. It balances, then settles, as if it belongs there. Eloise joins you, rubbing her eyes. Agnes appears with a pot of tea. The fire crackles in the hearth, and someone hums a tune you can't name. You sit, you breathe, and for the first time, you don't dread what's to come. You've seen the worst. You've held the fading. And yet, here you are, wrapped in warmth, watched by others, remembered by silence. You lean back, stare at the roof, and listen, not for bells, not for footsteps, just for the sound of life continuing, gently, stubbornly, beautifully. The day will begin soon. There will be roots to clean, cloth to patch, fire to feed. You will do it all, as always, but not because you must, because you can, because you are still here, and that, in this world, is everything. The candle has almost burned out now. The room is quiet. You feel the weight of the story, not heavy like sorrow, but soft like worn cloth. Let it settle. Let the breath slow. The leper colony fades behind your closed eyes, not because it disappears, but because it has become a part of you now, a whisper of resilience, a murmur of dignity in forgotten places. You remember their names, even if history does not. Guillaume, Isabeau, Michelle, Eloise, Agnes. You remember the way the soup steamed in chipped bowls, the way the bells sang in crooked harmony, the way silence was never empty. It was full of listening, and you, too, were there. You walked among them. You stood in the rain. You placed a pebble. You carried a name. You endured. Now, let the story drift into the corners of sleep. Let it rest where it needs to. You do not need to hold on to every word. Just the feeling. Just the hush. There's no need for endings here. Only breath. Only dusk. Only the gentle permission to stop searching. To let the world be small and kind and enough. Close your eyes. Unclench your jaw. Soften your brow. You're safe now. You're home.